Hello and welcome to the Measure of Whisky, where we discuss all things Scotch whisky. Today we're going to be talking about Lindores. Is this the first distillery to ever create single malt Scotch whisky? And is it any good?
Rising, and the race is on. The city's gonna be a mess before.
Welcome to the Measure of Whisky. Today we're talking about Lindores. Certain people believe that Lindores Abbey was the first place to create single malt Scotch whisky. Now let me just give you a real brief background on the distillery, a little bit of a history lesson. Lindores Abbey was a place for pilgrimage, where other religious sorts would spend their time, and obviously it has been in existence for hundreds and hundreds of years. But Lindores Abbey has recorded the first ever written description of single malt Scotch whisky via Friar John Corr, who was actually commissioned by King James IV to create aquavitae using 8 balls of malt. Now, to bring you up to speed, 8 balls of malt was a measurement that was used back in the day. That would equate to somewhere around 500 kilograms of malted barley to create aquavitae, which is Latin for water of life, which eventually turned into the name for whisky. And because in 1494 Friar John Corr physically wrote down that he was commissioned to create aquavitae using 8 balls of malt, lots of individuals believe that that is the first ever time Scotch whisky was ever produced. Is that a fact? Probably not. I'm certainly of the understanding that Scotch whisky was made long before then. That was just the first ever recorded literature, if you'd like, around single malt Scotch whisky. So Lindores, or Lindores Abbey, that's a seriously old distillery, right? No, I'm afraid not. Lindores Abbey only became a registered Scotch whisky distillery in 2017, so that would put it somewhere around the 7-year-old mark. And on the grand scale of Scotch whisky distilleries, that's very, very young. Now, plastered all over their marketing, their labelling, their website, it has the letters MCDXCIV. Now, the intelligent ones out there will understand that that is Roman numerals, and that equates to 1494, when Friar John Corr recorded that information about creating aquavitae. So it did happen at Lindores Abbey, but it's not been a registered distillery until 2017. But it can still cling on to that history, and I like that. I think that's great. Why not, okay? They were creating Scotch whisky at Lindores Abbey for hundreds and hundreds of years, but as a modern registered distillery, 2017. And anything that you're going to buy on the shelf that comes from Lindores is going to be a maximum of about 7 years old. So at the moment it's a very new distillery, it's young, but has it created anything worth buying? So the distillery itself is based in a place called Newborough in Fife. For those of us who don't know much about Scottish geography, the closest landmark that I can throw out at you would be St Andrews. So it's towards the east of the country, a little bit north of the Central Belt, but it does lie below the Scotch whisky Highland line, which means this is considered a lowland Scotch whisky. So that's the category it would fall into, lowland Scotch. And the distillery, even though it is very new, it's very young, they are clinging on to very traditional methods of creating Scotch whisky. They have old wooden style washbacks, for example, copper pot stills, and lots of the methods they're using are quite traditional. Everything that goes into this bottle as well is all local. The malted barley is all from Fife. Obviously the water comes from right up the road there, and they try and maintain that sort of close-knit tradition, which I really appreciate. So being a young distillery, what do they actually offer? What can they provide, or what can you go out and purchase? Well, you can actually buy their new make spirit. Now, for those of us who are not sure what that is, essentially right at the end of the distillation process, a clear liquid is going to come out of that spirit still is going to go through the spirit safe, and it's going to be classed as new make spirit. Now, most Scotch whisky gets its character, its aroma, its flavour, its colour, all from the maturation process. When a new make spirit comes out, typically it's not the most desirable thing to drink. However, some people are keen on new make spirit, and that's great. And Lindores actually has won a number of different awards for their new make spirit. They have released in 2021 a single malt named Lindores MCDXVIC MCDXVIC, of course, for $14.94. I haven't had the pleasure of trying that yet, so I can't give you any information on how that tastes. They also have a cask edition. There are 3 cask editions that they have released. The first one being the bourbon cask, which means the new make spirit is matured entirely in ex-bourbon casks. The next one they have is the red wine cask, so that is matured exclusively in ex-red wine casks. And the one I have right here is the sherry cask. So the stuff in this bottle, as soon as it comes out of the still, is then put into an ex-sherry butt, and it is matured for, you know, probably 4 to 5 years. I would imagine that the age of this is in here, but it's exclusively matured in that ex-sherry cask. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the colour of the whisky. So I'll bring this dram up. It's just so obviously matured in a sherry cask. That real dark, deep, rich honey colour. You know, it looks fantastic. For being a young whisky, on the eyes, the presentation of it looks incredible. You would never be able to tell that that was only 4 or 5 years of maturation in an ex-sherry cask, because it looks incredible. So on the nose, again, really obvious that that's ex-sherry. It smells fantastic, actually. You get some dark fruit notes, some dates, and maybe some prunes in there. There's almost a little bit of molasses coming through. But overall, really, really nice on the nose. On the palate, that dark fruit continues. Not necessarily overly rich. You don't get that real thick, viscous Christmas pudding that you might get from a Dalmore 12 or a Glenfarclas 15. But it's lovely. There's a little hint of spiciness and little kind of cinnamon notes in there as well, which is very nice. And on the finish, it's a medium finish, maybe medium to short, but a real nice nuttiness, almost a kind of almondy. So for being such a young dram, it's not overly apparent that this is only 4 or 5 years old. They do a really great job actually of hiding that. A lot of times when you have a younger whiskey, it can be very obvious. It can be just very ethanol forward. It hasn't had a lot of time to mature, to develop. You know, there's a lot of depth in this for the age. Now, like I said before, it doesn't go to the same sort of range as a 12 or a 15-year-old that's been matured in an ex-sherry butt. It doesn't have that sort of thickness and that depth yet. It's still quite light, but that's nice. It's absolutely fantastic and really easy to drink. The other interesting thing is that it's bottled at 49.4%. which they are considering to be unique limited edition strength. It's getting up closer to the cask strength, where I think the reason why they've done that is so that you're going to be able to experience a little bit more of that new make spirit that they've won awards for, you know, that they're kind of screaming and shouting about. If they diluted it closer to 40, it probably will have lost quite a bit of that character. So I'm actually a big fan of that. I'm glad that they kept the alcohol percentage quite high, because it really allows you to experience that new make spirit at the same time of getting those elements coming out of the sherry butt. So they've done well on that. So overall, probably not the first place to ever create Scotch whisky, but the history behind it's fantastic. I love it. The ex-sherry cask limited edition is really, really good. Definitely worth a try if you get your hands on this. Now, I'm off to try and find the MXCX, the 1494 version of their single malt. I'm excited to try that. Slange.
Friday, and the race is on. This city's gonna be